Good evening and welcome to Viewpoint. Tonight's topic is meeting the UEFA challenge. All football lovers on the Rock thoroughly enjoyed the build-up to the vote in May, and Gibraltar certainly celebrated when the GFA became Team 54. Now that we're in, though, there's a lot of hard work to do, and that's why tonight we're joined by the GFA's Chief Executive Officer, Dennis Beso. Good evening, Dennis.
Good evening, John.
Also joined by the GFA's Security and Integrity Officer, Lewis Wink. Good evening, Lewis.
Good evening, Jonathan.
Alan Buller is the GFA National Team Manager.
Good evening, Jonathan.
Thanks for joining us, Alan. And Leslie Asquez is the Grassroots Manager. Thank you for joining us, Leslie.
Evening.
Well, good evening, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us, obviously. A lot to discuss. Dennis, can we start with you? A lot of hard work for the GFA now. How would you sum up where you are right now?
Well, we're progressing along nicely. A long way to go, a very long way to go. But we've come on in leaps and bounds already, I think. Obviously, we have to look at our strategy right across the board and change basically the way football is run, played, administered. And that'll be a tough task, but we're very much looking forward to it.
Okay, a huge responsibility. Alan Buller, as National Team Manager, from a player's perspective and from the coach's perspective, what is the most pressing challenge for you?
Obviously, the biggest challenge is that my players come next year will have to face and play against probably the best players in the world. So it's getting them ready for that, not only physically but also mentally. So that's the biggest challenge.
Okay, Lewis, an interesting Lewis Wink, an interesting position for you as former RGP Commissioner. You've come in and your role is to oversee integrity and security. Can you talk us through that in a nutshell?
Right, yes. I mean the question of integrity in particular is quite a challenging one. We're moving into new grounds now, where Gibraltar, because it's membership of UEFA, is going to enter European competitions, and that will give the potential for fraudulent betting taking place and
match fixing
in layman's term, and that gives rise to the risk of potential approaches to local clubs, players, officials. My role is to guard against that.
Okay.
And on the question of security, well, we're moving into a new era now where we're going to get teams in high competition coming over, and with them, supporters coming over as well. I'm talking about stadium security with the prospect of the new stadium. So yes.
Well, we look forward to speaking to you about the access to the proposed new stadium up at Europa Point a little bit later on. Leslie, as Grassroots Manager, what does being part of UEFA mean for Gibraltar's young players?
Well, my new role now is to encourage participation and growth in all areas and work with all the subcommittees.
Okay.
That's promoting and developing the system, not only for the elite players, but all those, what we say, the number twos.
And roughly how many players are there, registered junior players?
We have 50 teams now at junior level, and we suspect the registration is still going on, and we think we're above 700 performers, boys and girls.
Okay, well, we look forward to unpacking some of those issues, but before we get there, some vital thoughts from our panel yet to come. A chance for you to have your say, of course. We want to hear from you on viewpoint@gbc.gi or by calling 200 79810. If you're online, you can also use the GBC Viewpoint hashtag. A lot of you have done that already, and we'll come to your questions very soon. Since getting into UEFA, The Rock now boasts more clubs, more players, there are more standards to meet, more funds to administer. Is the GFA really ready?
Well, first of all, the GFA have, as you well know, they have already started by employing people full-time. That is a very important step. It means that the GFA will become very, very professional. People will be looking after the sports, the development of the sports, the accounting of these sports. So that in itself is already a very, very forward step.
Gibraltar is ready to rise to the UEFA challenge because in its routine week in, week out playing of football, Gibraltar does have a structure to cater for and to comply with the requirements of UEFA.
It's It's changing football here in Gibraltar drastically, really. I mean, obviously, being able to play in the Europa League next year and the Champions League has made, I think, everyone in Gibraltar take note of what's happening and the changes happening already. Teams working a lot harder, their pre-season starting earlier. You can see that they're more serious about it.
The ripple effect that it's created at the moment has been brilliant. It's very exciting. New players from abroad, players that have rekindled their enthusiasm for football. Attendance rates at training has been boosted. Motivation rates is sky high at the moment.
Will be massive changes in store for the clubs, for the players, and for the GFA themselves. I mean, we've got very talented individuals in the board of the GFA, but what needs to be seen is that the change, there's got to be a transition period.
That is a challenge that the council has, you know, maintaining the average football player's ability to play, but also developing the elite players. So extra football pitches, if we can find them somewhere, is part of the solution, isn't it?
As we know, we're going to build the stadium in Europa Point, and that will be probably the hub of football, and we're quite pleased about that and quite excited. The location, as far as UEFA is concerned, is the best location ever because of its position. It's going to be considered to be the last stadium in Europe, and therefore the fact that in the background you have Africa, it actually is the border of UEFA as an organisation, and they're very excited about that.
Some thoughts there on meeting the UEFA challenge, a lot of relevant topics for tonight's conversation here on Viewpoint. Dennis, let's start with you. GFA Limited, there are a number of full-time professionals now working within the GFA. Can you talk us through what you've been doing and what that consists of?
That's right. As some of the commentators there rightly pointed out, we now have, for the first time in the GFA's history, really, on the administrative side, full-time professionals in place. I've been appointed as the chief executive of the association. We also have Louis Wink, who's with us this evening as our security integrity officer. We also have Richard Manning, who is now continuing with the role of the General Secretary in a full-time capacity in that role. And we also have Gareth Latine, the former president, who is now our International Relations Officer and Operations Director, dealing with logistical issues. The staffing of the association will increase. We have, for instance, Alan is now a full-time national team, the head coach of the national A team. And we also envisage that, in fact, we have a vacancy out at the moment for a director of refereeing, which is a request from UEFA as part of joining the referees charter. So,
how significant a step is this to have these professionals?
It's hugely significant. It's good for football in Gibraltar because there are people who can dedicate a full working day to football. We've been blessed in Gibraltar for decades from having a core of volunteers that are still there, who have never made any personal gain whatsoever from football, who are there purely for the love of the game. But obviously those men and women have their day jobs, so they could only dedicate a certain number of hours a day to football. Now that we have a professional corps to supplement that volunteer corps, we can give the football the full attention it deserves in Gibraltar, and it needs.
Okay, well, one of the issues highlighted there and addressed by a question here from David, who's written in. Thank you for doing so, David. We'll direct this question to Louis Wink. The location of the proposed new location for the national stadium up at Europa Point, from your perspective, we've seen how events up there in the past, the RAF Red Arrows spring to mind, how they can bring gridlock to that area. Are you concerned about transport and access to the proposed new site?
Well, we have to be realistic, and Gibraltar is, it's not blessed with very many, big areas to build the stadium, and I think Europa Point is I think it's the only site that you can, realistically build a stadium. What you have to do now is work around the project that is going to be built in Europa Point and overcome you know, the problems that, you know, we've learned from the past, the retardos being one of them, and there was an access, or rather an exit, you know, problem rather than an access problem. You know, too many people wanted to get away from the area through two approaches only. But that comes in the design, the planning of the stadium, with an input of all the stakeholders concerned in relation to security, safety, crowd management, and there are, you know, laid down plans already available to us through a security, UEFA security website that will assist tremendously in managing with that.
Okay.
But I'm sure that, you know, any obstacles that come our way, there will always be a way getting around them. You know, we have to adapt. Gibraltar has to adapt to big projects like this, like we have done in many other areas. So you know, I envisage challenges, but I also envisage many solutions to those challenges.
Okay. We've had a fair few tweets on this subject of the proposed new site. Well, I suppose I'm saying proposed. Is it 100% that that's where the new national stadium is going to be?
It's where the GFA would like to build a new national stadium. Obviously, we'll have to go through the various hoops that any other project in Gibraltar would have to go to, namely the Development and Planning Commission, but we're very confident and we're very hopeful for all the reasons that Lewis has outlined and for all the reasons that UEFA have outlined to us that this is the right place in which to build our new stadium.
Okay, on the GBC Viewpoint hashtag, a few quick-fire ones if we can, Dennis. Tommy is asking why can't the existing Victoria Stadium site be used to build a new stadium?
Right. The issue with the Victoria Stadium at present is that the capacity isn't enough for it to be able to host a full competitive international game. The minimum capacity needs to be 8,000 for that to happen. Unfortunately, because of the footprint of the Victoria Stadium and because of surrounding buildings, the fact that there's a residential area close by, the fact that there is a fully functioning international airport alongside the stadium, makes the growth of the stadium into an 8,000-seater capacity very difficult, particularly when you consider the fact that we cannot use temporary seating arrangements.
Okay, Rebecca's also asked about Devil's Tower Road, which I presume, I'm not sure, I mean, maybe she's referring to Devil's Tower Camp, but she might also be referring to Aerial Farm, which is now obviously allocated for housing. Right. DTC?
Well, DTC isn't an option because it's owned by the Ministry of Defence, but just to make clear, all these areas were actually looked at by UEFA's technical experts. They were in Gibraltar, they were physically driven around Gibraltar to see 3 or 4 different sites, including areas along the east side and also obviously including Europa Point. And the decision to go for Europa Point was theirs. They saw the site primarily because of the symbolic value of the site. We've already discussed how it's could potentially be the last stadium in Europe and, you know, have the sites to Africa and all the symbolism of that. But also because they felt that because of the footprint, the size of the area, that it would be a good location for the stadium, and that's why we've gone for it.
I'd like to bring Alan in. From a player's perspective, we had a tweet here from Marlene who's asking about the climatic conditions up there. Are you concerned that it's going to be very windy for your players?
No, not at all. Stadiums nowadays are built in worse areas than Europa for the actual weather. You know, it's everything's been taken care of. You know, so I'm not concerned. My players are not concerned. The stadium is being built by top professionals. So no, it's football has developed too much. Stadiums have developed way too much. So. Not at all. I haven't even thought about it a minute.
Okay. We've got a caller on the line. The number's 207 9810 if you'd like to speak to a member of the GFA team here tonight. We've got Ernest Olivares on the line. Good evening, Ernest.
Hello, good evening.
What's your question or viewpoint, please?
Yes, just a comment. Mr. Wing was commenting about the new stadium. I want to comment, what about all this reclamation that is being done? Why not do the stadium somewhere there?
The east side reclamation, I assume.
Sorry?
The east side reclamation next to the Caleta.
That's right. Go further out, more reclamation, and it'll be a good site there for the stadium.
Okay, thank you, Ernest. Thank you for